How does a counselor in the Christian tradition begin to handle the many problems of schizophrenic behavior that a person experiencing such problems may be subject to, or may subject himself to, internal and external forces that may impair his ability to function, that he is capable of intentionally and unintentionally stimulating and simulating such impairment in order to mislead, and that over a period of time or suddenly he can develop such faulty responses to stress situations that he loses a grip on reality. He may misread it as to picture him at once as a trait, conniving, self-deceptive, and foolish being. That is to say, as Christians look at it, the person is a sinner, who according to the Bible has been subjected by God to vanity because of his rebellion against his Creator. Sin, the violation of God's laws, has both direct and indirect consequences that account for all the bizarre behavior of schizophrenics. That is why Christians must refuse to ignore the biblical data. From the perspective of these scriptural data, all faulty behavior, which for the Christian is behavior that does not conform to the law of God, stems ultimately from the fundamental impairment of each human being at birth, consequence of the corruption of mankind resulting from the fall. No perfect human beings are born by ordinary generation. They all inherit the fallen nature of Adam, together with its organic, immoral defects that lead to all faulty, including all bizarre behavior. No aspect of a human being, no function, has escaped the distorting effects of sin. To some extent, therefore, the same problems seen in schizophrenics are common to all. The difference lies in one, what bodily distorting effects on sin. To some extent, therefore, what bodily functions are impaired, how severely and what sinful life responses have been developed by the counselee. It is also vital to ask whether the individual is redeemed by the grace of God, since redemption involves a gradual renewal of human nature. The identification of the problem of schizophrenia as a theological difficulty points towards a theological solution. In the same way, a non-theological diagnosis, mental illness, etc., leads to a non-theological solution. Wrong labels point in wrong directions, which in turn end only in more frustration. Schizophrenia is a psychological or psychiatric label which leads towards psychological or psychiatric solutions. On the other hand, investigation shows that a particular kind of bizarre behavior should be labeled as a chemical malfunction stemming not from personal sin, such as sleep loss, but is rather solely the result of the fall. That conclusion leads towards a medical solution. If it indicates that the problem comes from sinful living, the term sin points in the direction of a theological solution. It is a serious fault thus to suggest that anything less than God himself can solve a problem that fundamentally has to do with one's relationship to him. The Christian counsel's approach, therefore, will begin with an attempt to discover whether the behavior of any given counselee stems fundamentally from organic defects or from sinful behavior on his part. In the case of the bizarre behavior, whenever indicated, he will insist upon careful medical examinations to detect any glandular or other chemical malfunction, brain damage, toxic problems, etc. But when he is reasonably assured that at base the problem is not organic, or that it is not only organic, he will counsel on the supposition that such behavior must stem from sinful life patterns. He will be aware, of course, of the vital fact that the counselee is a whole person whose problems cannot always be divided neatly into the categories organic and inorganic, or into categories of misreading or misleading. There are often elements of both, and most assuredly the organic affects the nanorganic, and vice versa. When Philip smashed a chair on the floor, attacked his counselor, wept uncontrollably, whined in self-pity, and spoke of hearing voices and taking trips on a flying saucer, more than one problem lay behind these difficulties: sleep loss, possible chemical malfunction, 12 years of frustration with an inexplicable problem, resentments and suspicion toward physicians, psychiatrists, and ministers, bitterness over scores of shock treatments, a severely distorted reality construct, sinful patterns of living, and institutionalization, all influenced and motivated by a sinful nature, combined to produce the bizarre behavior.